Officer Camden took 2 slow steps forward, his fingers brushing the handle of his holstered weapon. "You threatening an officer, vagrant?" he said, voice low but coiled like a spring. The man at the counter, who hadn't yet given his name, didn't move. Didn't blink. "No, sir," he said calmly. "Just eating dinner." He wore a worn-out jacket. Carried nothing but a name, a scar, and a pair of dog tags. To the officers in that diner, he was just another homeless black man, someone to shove, to humiliate, to forget. But what they didn't know. He wasn't just anyone. He was a decorated war hero, with one phone call that could reach the Pentagon. And when that call was made, everything, their careers, their secrets, their power, came crashing down. Stay with this story. Because when the truth finally speaks, even the system can't look away. The snow came down in slow, lazy flurries that blanketed the streets of Clearwater Springs, Montana. Just after 9 p.m., the sidewalks were mostly empty, the locals long tucked into warmth. The few stragglers still outside moved fast-hunched shoulders, gloved hands jammed in pockets, moving from store door to car like shadows afraid of the cold. But one man wasn't in a hurry. He moved with steady, deliberate steps down Main Street, his boots crunching over old ice, his long military-style coat dusted white from the storm. The coat looked older than the diner he was walking toward, with a faded American flag patch sewn near the left shoulder and creases that spoke of decades, not seasons. His jeans were frayed at the cuffs. His boots cracked. But he carried himself not like a vagrant but like a man who had endured worse than winter. No one paid him much attention. Just another drifter. Another problem on 2 legs. But inside the Red Owl Diner, people would remember him. He paused outside the glass door, brushing snow off his shoulders with one clean sweep of his hand. Then he squared his back. Checked both exits through the frosted glass. Habit. Old training. Then he stepped inside. The warmth hit him like a wall. The smell of bacon grease and stale coffee clung to the air like memory. He closed his eyes for a second. Just 1 second. Then opened them again. The diner fell silent. You know that moment when someone different walks into a room full of people who've convinced themselves they're open-minded? It's quiet. Not hostile, just tight. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A teenage boy lowered his milkshake glass without sipping. An old man slid his wallet off the counter and into his inner coat pocket. A woman pulled her daughter close. The man didn't flinch. He just picked an empty stool at the counter, third from the left with clean sight lines to the front entrance and the kitchen exit. He set his duffel bag at his feet. Sat tall. Then said, quietly, to no one in particular, "Just here for a hot meal." Her name was Maya Reese, 24, waitress at the Red Owl since she was 21, saving tips to help put her little brother through trade school. She was used to the regulars. Truckers, retirees, the occasional teenage heartbreak sobbing over pie. But something about this man, the way he didn't shrink or puff up, caught her attention. "Can I get you something?" she asked gently, sliding a laminated menu toward him. He didn't even glance at it. "Coffee, black," he said. His voice was deep but warm, soft around the edges like he'd been quiet for a long time. "And whatever the special is. If it's not too much trouble, ma'am." "Ma'am. Not darlin' or sweetie." Maya blinked. She nodded. "Chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes and green beans." "Sounds perfect," the man said. Maya poured his coffee and turned toward the kitchen, but not before glancing at the corner booth. And there they were. Officer Roy Camden, big, stocky, always leaning back in the booth like the town owed him something. And next to him, Officer Jake Voss, thinner, meaner, with a stare that never blinked. They were regulars on Tuesday nights, always sitting through most of Maya's shift, cracking jokes about crime and cleaning up the streets. Roy raised an eyebrow at her. Then nodded toward the man at the counter. Maya's stomach tightened. She knew that look. She walked back to the kitchen window and passed the order slip, keeping her eyes on the grill as she spoke. Chicken fried steak, order up. From behind her, Roy's voice rang out loud enough to carry. Hope we're not out of silverware. Might want to count the forks after that guy leaves. Laughter from Jake, and check the bathroom. These guys love to shoot up somewhere warm. The man didn't flinch. Didn't turn. Just lifted his coffee and took a long, slow sip. But Maya saw it the way his jaw tightened, the muscle near his temple twitched. Her hands were shaking as she brought his plate. She set it down gently. Here you go, she whispered. Let me know if you need anything else. Thank you, ma'am, he said again, with a slow nod. That's when Jake got up. He sauntered to the counter, took the stool next to the man. Leaned in close. Hey Maya, he said, eyes never leaving the stranger. How's your brother doing in the academy? Maya kept her voice even. He's doing great. That's good, Jake said. We need good cops. Cops who know who belongs and who doesn't. He turned slightly to the man. You know what I mean, right? The man didn't look at him. I know exactly what you mean, he said quietly. Jake leaned closer. You folks always think your military service gives you a pass. But I've seen the likes of you. Real vets. They get jobs. Build families. You're just. The man put his coffee down. Slowly. Turned toward Jake. And looked him dead in the eye. I earned my dignity in Fallujah, he said. I don't need to earn it again from you. The diner went dead silent. Maya's hand tightened around the coffee pot. Roy stood from the booth, eyes cold, hand inching toward his belt. The man never moved. But that moment, that stillness, was the crack in the glass. The first fracture in something much, much bigger. To be continued in segment 2, the call that shook Washington, when a waitress dials a number that sets off a chain reaction across the nation. Stick around, because what started as a quiet act of cruelty is about to become a storm no one saw coming. Snow still blew in sideways outside the Red Owl Diner, but inside, the air was thick with something else: tension. The kind you feel right before a thunderstorm splits the sky. Officer Camden took 2 slow steps forward, his fingers brushing the handle of his holstered weapon. You threatening an officer, vagrant, he said, voice low but coiled like a spring. The man at the counter, who hadn't yet given his name, didn't move. Didn't blink. No, sir, he said calmly. Just eating dinner. The quiet around them was electric. A few patrons picked up their phones, pretending to scroll, but recording every second. Jake Voss slammed his hand down on the counter, loud enough to make the sugar dispensers jump. You need to leave. Now. You're disturbing the peace. The man turned slightly in his seat. I paid for this meal. I intend to finish it. Camden joined him at the counter. Or are you refusing to comply with a lawful order? Behind the counter, Maya's face paled. But then she did something small and extraordinary. She slipped her phone out of her apron pocket and quietly tapped the record button. The camera stayed low, pointed at the counter, picking up everything. Officers, Maya said, her voice steady even as her heart thudded against her ribs, he hasn't caused any trouble. He's just. Stay out of this, Maya, Camden snapped. Unless you want to cause trouble for your little brother at the academy. That stopped her cold. It wasn't just a threat. It was a message. We know who you are, and we can ruin you. Jake reached out and gripped the man's shoulder. On your feet. Now. The man stayed seated, meeting Jake's stare with calm, level eyes. I've broken no laws. I have the right to eat the meal I paid for. That's 3 strikes, Camden muttered. Disturbing the peace, resisting an officer, threatening behavior. Phones were recording openly now. Nobody said a word. Nobody moved to stop it. Then the man spoke again, his voice still quiet, but suddenly sharp enough to cut steel. 3 tours in Iraq. 2 bronze stars. 1 purple heart. I've earned my place at this counter. Jake yanked him up hard, nearly knocking the stool over. But the man didn't resist. As they dragged him toward the door, he turned his head slightly to Maya. "If something happens to me," he said clearly, "call Brigadier General Frank Halston at the Pentagon. Tell him Major Gabriel Rowe is in trouble." The door slammed behind them. Maya stood frozen, still holding the coffee pot. For a moment, she thought it was a delusion. A fantasy. Every town had its crazy vet claiming government connections. But there was something about the way he'd said it. The name. The rank. The calm. She couldn't let it go. She ran out into the snow after them, just in time to see the officers slam him against the side of the cruiser. His dog tags caught the light as they flew from his neck and hit the icy pavement. Jake stepped on them, grinding them into the snow. "Oops," he smirked, kicking them aside. The cruiser pulled away and disappeared down 6th Street. Maya stood there in the snow, her breath fogging in front of her. She knelt down and picked up the dog tags. Brushed off the snow. "Read the name, Rowe, Gabriel A. O. for MAJ, U.S. Army Methodist. Blood type O+. Back inside the diner, she locked herself in the employee restroom and stared at the dog tags in her palm. Her phone was still recording. Her fingers trembled as she tapped stop. She scrolled through her contacts. Nothing. She didn't even know how to call the Pentagon. After a minute of pacing, she did what most people would do, she Googled it. Pentagon main line, 703-571-3343. She stared at the number for a long time. Then she hit call. 3 rings. Department of Defense, operator speaking. "How may I direct your call?" Maya swallowed. I need to speak with Brigadier General Frank Halston. Please. It's urgent. It's about Major Gabriel Rowe. He's in danger. There was a pause. Then. "1 moment, ma'am." She waited. Every second felt like a year. Somewhere in the background, she could hear muffled voices, the clicking of a keyboard. Then the line clicked. "This is Colonel Rourke, General Halston's aide." "Who is this?" "My name is Maya Reese. I'm a waitress at a diner in Clearwater Springs, Montana. A man named Gabriel Rowe was just arrested by 2 local officers. They roughed him up. Humiliated him. He said to call you." Another pause. Then. "Please hold for General Halston." She almost dropped the phone. The voice that came on next was deep, gravelly, authoritative. "This is Brigadier General Frank Halston. You have information about Major Gabriel Rowe?" Maya stumbled through her story, trying to remember every detail, what the officer said, how Rowe never raised his voice, how the whole place went silent when he said his name. When she finished, there was a pause on the other end. Then a slow, deliberate sentence. "You did exactly the right thing, Ms. Reese. I need you to send me that recording immediately. My aide will text you a secure number. Then I want you to go home. Do not speak to anyone else about this. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," she whispered. "But, will he be okay?" "Major Rowe," the general said, his voice softening slightly, "is one of the finest officers I've ever commanded. And I take care of my own." The holding cell in Clearwater Springs PD was small, barely more than a concrete closet. No windows. 1 metal bench. A camera in the corner, aimed straight down like a lazy eye that never blinked. Major Gabriel Rowe sat still, spine straight, arms resting on his knees. He breathed evenly, eyes closed, as if meditating. But he wasn't escaping. He was training. Resetting. Years ago, inside the chaos of a blown-out compound in western Iraq, he'd learned how to shut out noise. Disassociate from pain. Stay alert when sleep was impossible. It wasn't peace. It was discipline. Even now, with bruised ribs from Camden's unnecessary shove and a pounding headache from Voss's grip around his neck, Rowe was focused. Counting seconds. Reviewing escape options. Listening for voices. Waiting. And then it came. A clatter of shoes. Hushed tones. Keys in the door. He opened his eyes. 2 people entered Federal, clearly. Not local cops. Their suits were tailored, black. Their movements sharp. A man and a woman. The woman led. "Major Rowe," she said respectfully. He stood. "You're free to go," she added. "We're with the Department of Defense. Internal Affairs." Rowe blinked once. That was faster than usual. The male agent extended a hand. "Special Agent Cortez. This is Agent Monroe. We're acting on direct orders from Brigadier General Halston." Rowe allowed himself the smallest smile. "Old man still has teeth, huh?" "He does," Monroe confirmed. "And they're bared." They escorted him out without cuffs, past the booking desk where Camden stood arguing with the sheriff. "You can't just waltz in here with a badge from D.C. and," Camden trailed off when he saw Rowe, upright and flanked by federal agents. Agent Cortez didn't break stride. "Officer Camden," he said coolly, "your department's treatment of a decorated veteran is currently under formal review. I suggest you start familiarizing yourself with the Constitution." The sheriff, a man named Dorsey with sweat beading on his forehead, blurted, "This doesn't represent the values of our department." "We'll be the judge of that," Monroe said, and they kept walking. Rowe didn't look at Camden or Voss. He didn't need to. He knew what silence did to men like them. Outside, snow still coated the town like a heavy hush. But this time, it felt different. Like the calm before something big. Across the street, Maya stood waiting, coat zipped up to her chin, hands tucked under her armpits for warmth. Her breath came in clouds, but her eyes were bright. Rowe saw her before the agents did. "You made the call," he said simply. Maya nodded, then held out his dog tags. "Didn't really think it would work. I mean, the Pentagon." It sounded insane. He took the tags with gentle fingers, slipping them back around his neck like armor. "It always works," he said quietly. "Truth scares cowards. And Frank Halston always keeps his promises." "Who is he?" she asked. "How does a general know your name?" Rowe looked past her, into the snowy sky where the clouds were starting to break. "That's a long story," he said. "Not one for tonight. Where will you go?" "I've got a place," he said. "Don't worry about me. But thank you for believing me." She hesitated. Then reached into her tote bag and pulled out a small package, wrapped in diner paper. "Your dinner. I had them wrap it to go." Rowe took it. Nodded. "Kindness is rare these days. Don't lose it." Then he turned and walked away into the snow, the night swallowing his silhouette once more. Back in Washington, D.C., Brigadier General Frank Halston sat alone in his office inside the defense wing. The walls were lined with books and citations, but none of them mattered as much as the photo on his desk, him, 20 years younger, in the Iraqi desert, standing shoulder to shoulder with a man covered in blood and sand. Gabriel Rowe. That man had refused orders to evacuate a burning Humvee. Had crawled through wreckage to drag Halston out with a shattered leg and a collapsed lung. Then he'd gone back and pulled out 3 more men under fire. Now that same man had been tossed around in a diner like trash. Halston didn't just see an injustice. He saw a mission. He picked up a secure phone. Dialed a number from memory. "This is Brigadier General Halston. I need immediate deployment of Internal Affairs to Clearwater Springs PD. Also notify Department of Veterans Affairs and loop in the DOJ. This is a priority case. Target, systemic abuse of homeless veterans. Within an hour, 5 agencies were moving. The next morning, news vans began arriving outside the police station. By noon, social media was ablaze. #JusticeForRowe was trending nationwide. The national attention came fast and with it, the pressure. Within 24 hours of Gabriel Rowe's release, the streets of Clearwater Springs weren't just cold. They were tense. Satellite trucks lined Main Street. Reporters stalked the sidewalk outside City Hall. Even the mayor canceled her pancake breakfast appearance. Inside a modest motel on the edge of town, Rowe sat across from Ava Cross, a civil rights attorney from Baltimore. Sent by General Halston, Ava wasn't your average suit. At 35, she had the resume of someone twice her age and the focus of a woman who never took no as a final answer. She had arrived just hours after the story broke, notebook in hand, legal pad already filling with names and accusations. As the daughter of a judge and a product of 3 military generations, she understood both structure and rebellion. Rowe didn't speak much as she laid out her files. He watched. Listened. When she finally looked up, her eyes met his with calm precision. "I've reviewed the footage," she said. "The phone recording. The body cam logs that mysteriously cut out for a 6-minute gap. And I've already been warned by 2 local officials not to dig too deep." She paused. "I intend to dig anyway." Rowe folded his arms. "You'll find rot." "I expect to." He nodded once. Then gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Let's get to work." That afternoon, Ava paid a visit to the Red Owl Diner. Maya was still on shift, pale, jittery, eyes constantly darting toward the door. Ava slid into a corner booth and waited until Maya brought coffee, her apron already stained with today's rush. "You're the lawyer," Maya said softly, eyes sharp despite her nervousness. Ava nodded. "You've already done more than most people would have dared. Now I need your help again." She slid a release form across the table. Maya's hands trembled slightly. "If I sign this, it's official." "It's protected," Ava corrected. "This puts your statement under whistleblower status. They can't touch you legally." Maya exhaled slowly. Then signed. But she didn't stop there. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a USB drive. "I went back the next morning," she explained. "Pulled the security footage. Mark works here too, he has access to the system. I told him I was backing up data for inventory audits." Ava raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You might have missed your calling." Maya smiled faintly. "I just kept thinking, what if I hadn't made that call?" A pause. What if they'd hurt him worse? Ava reached across the table. "You probably saved his life, Maya." Back at the motel, Rose sat alone by the window, watching the falling snow with a soldier's patience. Every sound outside, car tires, footsteps, wind chimes, was catalogued, logged, assessed. Then a knock at the door. He stood instantly, silent as breath. Ava opened the door and stepped in, removing her gloves. "She brought footage," she said. "Full diner security feed. Audio and video." She placed the USB drive on the desk. "Time to dig." That evening, Ava and Rose sat side by side on the motel bed, the laptop perched between them. They watched the confrontation unfold again, this time in wide-angle clarity. Camden's aggression. Voss's sneer. Rose's calm refusal. The moment Maya stepped back, face white with fear, as Camden threatened her family. And then. The grab. The twist. The unmistakable abuse of power. Ava paused the video. "This isn't an isolated case," she murmured. "Men like them don't do this once. Rowe nodded slowly. They've been doing it for years. Then we need more voices. The next morning, Ava began canvassing the town discreetly. She visited the shelter near the rail yard. The free clinic. The soup kitchen run by Sister Elaine, who had quietly aided veterans for a decade. And slowly, the stories started surfacing. A man missing 3 teeth after an altercation with Camden in 2020. A woman, formerly Navy, arrested 3 times for loitering within a week of moving into a transitional home. A retired mechanic Vietnam-era left shivering in sub-zero cold after being relocated from his tent on the edge of town. Found 3 days later with frostbite on both hands. They all had the same ending, no charges filed. No paperwork. Just silence. Until now. Back at the motel, Ava set up a war room. Printouts. Maps. Markers. Timelines. Maya brought food and coffee between shifts. Gabriel watched quietly, offering strategy like a battlefield commander. And that night, Ava spoke the words they all knew were coming. This isn't just about Clearwater Springs, she said, pacing the motel floor. This is a playbook. A coordinated effort to criminalize homelessness, especially among veterans. And we just caught them running it. Rowe leaned forward. Then we expose them. Exposing them means going national, Ava replied. Press. Legal filings. Public pressure. But it also means risk. To all of us. Gabriel Rowe looked her dead in the eye. I've seen war in 3 countries, he said. I've buried men who deserved better. If this is another battlefield, then I'm already suited up. The morning after Gabriel Rowe's story began making national headlines, the Red Owl Diner opened late and with 1 less employee. Maya Reese walked in expecting a quiet shift. Instead, her manager was already waiting behind the counter with a printed letter in hand. I'm gonna need your apron back, Maya, he said. She blinked. Excuse me? You've missed too many shifts. Unreliable. Not a good look with reporters sniffing around. Maya stared at him, stunned. You mean because I called the Pentagon? He didn't answer. Just held out the letter, already signed and stamped. You're done here. No warning. No severance. Just like that. Later that day, her name and face appeared on local Facebook forums plastered with captions like "Traitor waitress sides with bum over police." People commented with fire. Angry emojis. One man posted her apartment address. That night, someone threw a brick through her window. Attached was a note, "Cop haters get what they deserve." Back at the motel, Gabriel helped board up the shattered glass. Maya stood nearby, her face pale, eyes rimmed red from tears and fury. This is insane, she whispered. All because I hit record. They always hit truth first, Gabriel said, pressing a nail into the frame. Then they panic. Then they lose. She managed a tight laugh. You always talk like a soldier. I've been one longer than I haven't. Meanwhile, Ava Cross was deep in legal prep mode. She filed a whistleblower protection motion on Maya's behalf. Submitted an early civil rights complaint to the Department of Justice. Requested Maya's police report regarding the brick-throwing incident. But the response from Clearwater Springs PD? We found no surveillance footage, no leads, and no suspects. The case is closed. Ava read it twice. Then dropped it on the motel desk with a bitter smile. They're not even pretending. That evening, something else happened. A truck. A near collision. A warning. Ava was driving back from a late dinner with a USB full of new interview footage in her passenger seat when an unmarked pickup veered suddenly into her lane. No lights. No signals. Just speed and shadow. She swerved hard. Narrowly avoided slamming into a telephone pole. By the time she caught her breath, the truck was gone. And when she reached her motel, the door was ajar. Room ransacked. Laptop gone. This isn't just intimidation anymore, Ava said later, after Gabriel arrived and swept the room with methodical care. This is active sabotage. Gabriel scanned the mess. His fingers found the hollowed baseboard behind the desk. They're scared, he said. Ava raised an eyebrow. That makes them dangerous. Gabriel nodded. Then it's time to fight back. Not their way. Our way. Ava tilted her head. And what exactly is our way? He looked at her. Calm. Unblinking. I need to make a phone call. At a gas station on the edge of town, Gabriel used the payphone. No cell towers. No traceable data. Old habits. He dialed a number he hadn't used in over a decade. It rang once. Twice. Then, Q's Tech Haven. We fix what others can't. How can I? Gabriel spoke clearly, the ghost needs fire support. A pause. Then, Rowe. Holy hell. That really you, man? It's me, Q. And I need your help. 6 hours later, a black and blue van rolled into Clearwater Springs. Painted across the side, Q's Tech Haven, we make it work even when it shouldn't. Out rolled a wheelchair. In it sat Quincy, Q. Alvarez, former signal specialist from Gabriel's unit, now a cyber wizard with titanium legs and a Batman hoodie. Behind him came 3 others, Bree Hamilton, ex-military police, counter-intel genius. Marcus, Ghost, Lane, surveillance and data recovery expert. Jordan, Link, Park, cyberforensics, former NSA contractor. They weren't just a team. They were the cavalry. Inside the motel, Q clasped Gabriel's forearm in their old battlefield grip. Still getting into trouble, huh? Still pulling me out of it, I hope, Gabriel replied. Ava stared at the setup they were building: monitors, jammers, portable firewalls. You all do this often? She asked. Q grinned. Only when justice gets stuck in a chokehold. Q's van became the beating heart of the resistance. In less than 12 hours, a dingy motel room had been transformed into a command center. Monitors flickered with live feeds. Antennas hummed softly, intercepting police radio. Power strips glowed red, orange, green like traffic lights in a war zone. And at the center of it all stood Gabriel Rowe, silent, focused, a soldier once more. Q handed everyone encrypted phones. These aren't traceable. Use them for everything from here on out. Trace Hamilton mapped local police stations, officer routes, and unmarked cruisers. Ghost Lane started tracking social media mentions, scanner traffic, and courthouse leaks. Link ran a pattern recognition program across internal emails from the town's server pulled from a public records vulnerability he'd exploited within 10 minutes of arrival. Priorities clear, Q said, tapping the main monitor. We mapped the system. Who's connected to whom? Who gives the orders? Who gets their hands dirty? And who gets paid, Link added. Because corruption this embedded always has a bank account. Meanwhile, Ava kept building the legal framework. She compiled affidavits, constructed timelines, and prepped Maya and Gabriel for possible federal testimony. The evidence was stacking, but they needed something damning. A thread that, when pulled, would unravel everything. It came from the most unexpected source. Rachel Miller. Age 38. Former Army nurse. Homeless for 2 years. She'd been bouncing between shelters and cheap motels ever since her medical discharge. On the surface, just another casualty of bureaucracy and post-service neglect. But Rachel had kept notes. Police came through our camp every 2 weeks, she said in a whispered interview Ava recorded from the back of the Salvation Center. Always the same officers. Voss. Camden. A few others. They'd say it was health inspections, but they'd trash our things. Cut up tents. Confiscate IDs. Medications. Dog tags. Dog tags? Ava asked, her tone sharpening. Rachel nodded. Yeah. One guy, Freddie, had his dad's tags on his neck. Voss yanked them off and said, "You're not a soldier anymore. You're a liability." Ava glanced at Gabriel. He was stone still. A few hours later, Ghost found something. Encrypted payments. Monthly transfers to several Clearwater officers, amounts ranging from $2,000 to $5,000. Source: a private security firm, Duracor Solutions. Link traced the funds through 3 shell companies and 2 dummy LLCs. But the end point was unmistakable. Duracor had contracts with dozens of towns across the Midwest. Officially, they provided community risk assessments and urban renewal consulting. Unofficially, they were paying officers to clean up neighborhoods before development deals closed. Gabriel leaned over the monitor. They're pushing out the poor to flip the land. They're sterilizing blocks, Q confirmed grimly. Displacing anyone who doesn't fit the investor brochure. Ava stood, hands on her hips. Gentrification through intimidation. And they're using law enforcement to enforce it. And that's when Jameson called. Maya's brother. Police Academy cadet. Clean record. Idealistic. He had heard what happened to his sister. He wanted to talk. They met in secret. Q's van parked beneath a burned-out billboard on the edge of town. Jameson looked nervous. Pale. His Police Academy sweatshirt looked suddenly too big on him. "They're using us," he said without small talk. "They're teaching us how to manipulate reports. How to make clean arrests. Brick, that's Captain Brickman, he holds unofficial trainings. Off record." Ava raised an eyebrow. "What kind of trainings?" "How to write up resisting arrest when there wasn't any," Jameson said. "How to classify someone as aggressive if they flinch during a pat-down. And he brags about it. Says we're taking out the trash." Gabriel clenched his fists. Maya touched her brother's arm. "You knew." "I didn't know how far it went," Jameson said quietly. "But after what they did to you." He reached into his bag and handed them something small and round. "A body mic. I'll wear it. In the next session. You'll get everything." That night, back at the motel, Q's team prepped a burner laptop, encrypted hard drive, and real-time relay from the mic Jameson would wear. Operation Truthline, Q called it. "We're going to hear them bury themselves." Clearwater Springs PD ran their unofficial cadet trainings on Thursday nights. Not in the academy classroom. Not at the precinct. But in a storage unit behind the old county fairgrounds. No windows. One fluorescent bulb. Concrete floors stained with years of grease and indifference. That's where they taught young officers how things really worked. That's where Captain Darrell Brickman, a 20-year veteran of the force with a beer gut and a God complex, delivered sermons on power, perception, and plausible deniability. And this week, Jameson Reese was wearing a wire. He pulled into the gravel lot 10 minutes early, heart thudding so loud it nearly drowned out the soft buzz of the recorder hidden in his collar. Q's team was listening from half a mile away, parked in an abandoned strip mall with 4 laptops, 3 antennas, and an engineer named Ghost chewing a toothpick like it was battle rations. "Clear signal," Ghost said into the mic. "We're live." Ava sat beside him, notebook open, headset tight. Gabriel stood in the back, arms folded across his chest, unmoving. He hadn't blinked in 2 minutes. Inside the unit, Jameson took his usual seat, second folding chair from the left. 5 other cadets were already there. Fresh faces. Eager grins. They didn't know yet. Brickman entered last. Wore his badge on a chain like a badge of honor. "All right," he said, clapping once. Tonight's topic, narrative control. He wrote the words on a whiteboard stained with faded bullet points from weeks past. Out there, he continued, truth doesn't matter. What matters is what goes in the report. You're not just enforcing law. You're telling the story. He paced slowly. Had a guy last week, tweaker, dirty, sitting on a park bench outside the library. No ID. No address. We call that a non-value target. He paused for effect. City wants that bench clean. I write him up for loitering, disturbing the peace, aggressive posture. Boom. One less liability. Jameson swallowed hard. Ava scribbled furiously. Gabriel didn't move. Brickman leaned forward, resting his hands on the folding table. Now some of you might think, but what if he didn't do anything? His voice turned mocking. Maybe he just wanted to read a book. Laughter. Brickman straightened. You want to keep this job. You learn to think bigger. You're not here to protect everyone. You're here to protect order. And that means recognizing when someone doesn't belong. Another cadet raised a hand. What about the guy last month, the vet with the service dog? Didn't he get booked for resisting? Oh, Thompson. Brickman smirked. Yeah, good one. Dude tried to pull the PTSD card. Wouldn't step off the sidewalk when Camden told him to move. He shrugged. So Camden shoved him. Guy fell, got loud, we put him in cuffs. Claimed we broke his ribs. Internal review found nothing. Pause. Because we write the reviews. Laughter again. Jameson kept still. Ghost's eyes narrowed at the laptop. He just buried himself. Ava leaned closer. Keep going, Jameson, come on. Brickman moved to the next topic. Now, let's talk bonuses. That got their attention. You didn't hear this from me, but certain partners reward initiative. Development firms like Clean Streets. They pay for results. He tapped his badge. You bag 3 low threats a week. You'll notice extra zeros on your quarterly bonus. Don't ask where it came from. Just keep earning it. Jameson glanced at his notepad, careful not to tremble. What if someone fights back? A cadet asked. Then you escalate, Brickman said flatly. No cameras, no hesitation. Remember, force looks justified when the suspect's record is dirty. So plant if you have to. No one laughed this time. Not even the cadets. In the van, Ava looked ill. That's conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law, she said aloud. Multiple counts. Gabriel finally spoke. It's more than that. Ava turned. What? His jaw clenched. It's warfare. Against civilians. Brickman was winding down. He sipped from a thermos likely filled with more bourbon than coffee and leaned against the whiteboard. Final tip, leverage. He turned to Jameson, you've got a sister, right? Works the diner. Jameson froze. Brickman chuckled. Don't worry. She's loyal. Hell of a cup of coffee. Another pause. But if she weren't, you'd remind her what's at stake. You'd remind her that families of officers have expectations. And consequences. That's when Jameson reached his limit. He stood. Fast. Sir, I need to use the restroom. Brickman waved him off. Back in 5. Jameson stepped out, walked to his car, shut the door, and finally breathed. Then he whispered into the mic. Tell me you got all of that. Back at the van, Ghost grinned like he'd hit a jackpot. Every word, he said. Multiple channels. Backed up. Mirrored. Watermarked. Even if they wipe half the PD, we've got enough for a federal sweep. Ava stared at the audio file glowing on the screen. This is it, she said. This is our bombshell. Gabriel's voice was cold and certain. Then let's drop it. They didn't sleep that night. Back at the motel, Q's team moved like clockwork. Ghost scrubbed the audio, enhanced the voices, removed ambient hum. Link layered in the diner footage, the body cam gaps, the security timestamps. Trace overlaid police arrest logs with payment records from Duracor's shell accounts. Ava sat with Maya and Jameson in the corner, preparing legal affidavits for submission alongside the evidence. Gabriel Rowe. He just stood by the window, staring at the black sky outside, one hand lightly brushing the dog tags around his neck. He wasn't thinking about the file. He was thinking about what would happen after. By sunrise, the video was done. 11 minutes, 37 seconds long. Titled simply, Voices of the Shield Men, Clearwater Exposed. Q clicked play one final time. It opened on Gabriel sitting in the motel's back corner, the same coat he'd worn in the diner slung over the back of his chair. My name is Gabriel Rowe. I served 3 tours overseas. I have a silver star, 2 bronze, and a back that doesn't let me sleep much anymore. 2 weeks ago, I was arrested for ordering meatloaf and not looking away fast enough. His voice didn't tremble. It didn't shout. It simply told the truth. Cut to diner footage. Camden sneering. Voss dropping the sugar packet. Dance for your dinner. Then the muffled tension. The arrest. The dog tags in the snow. Then the recording. Brickman's voice confident, slick, undeniable. We write the reviews. You want bonuses? Bag 3 low threats. Truth doesn't matter. The report does. Every quote, every laugh, every violation laid out with the cold clarity of a crime scene. As the last frame faded to black, words appeared on screen in white. This isn't just Clearwater Springs. This is happening everywhere. But not anymore. Not in silence. Underneath, a link to full documentation. Names. Evidence. Contacts. Gabriel looked at Ava. You sure we're ready? She nodded once. We're past ready. Maya hit upload. Within 5 minutes, 10,000 views. Within 30, trending regionally. Hashtag Voices of Shieldmen. Within 2 hours, it crossed 1 million. The first reporter showed up outside the motel at 10:14 a.m. By noon, CNN was calling. By nightfall, the Department of Justice had issued a formal statement. A federal investigation into the Clearwater Springs Police Department has been opened. And across town, in the quiet office of Mayor Elaine Wilkins, phones rang off the hook while her assistant frantically scribbled on a legal pad. I need Brickman, the mayor snapped. Now. But Brickman was gone. Hadn't shown up to work. Hadn't answered calls. His cruiser parked at the station, but no sign of him. He was already in the wind. Gabriel wasn't surprised. He'd seen this before. When systems cracked, the architects never stuck around to face the debris. But this time, Gabriel wasn't waiting for permission. He was going after him. They found the trail in a bank ledger. While the internet exploded with outrage and the Department of Justice scrambled for statements, Q's team quietly did what they did best: followed money. Link cross-referenced withdrawals, burner phone locations, and surveillance gaps in traffic cams. The breakthrough came at 4:37 p.m., when Marcus, Ghost, Lane triangulated 3 separate ATM hits to one location, a small private airfield on the edge of Glenvale, 40 miles north. No flight logs filed. No departure manifests. Just a name listed on a hangar rental, D. Brickman. By 5:10 p.m., Gabriel Rowe was in the van, lacing his boots, his jaw tight. He's running, he said flatly, strapping his holster not for a gun, but a tactical knife he hadn't worn in years. Q rolled beside him, already running drone diagnostics. Thermals up. We'll have eyes from the sky before he knows you're even close. Ava stepped in, holding up her phone. We can alert the feds now. Get them there before takeoff. Gabriel shook his head. If they show up with lights and badges, he'll vanish. If he knows he's cornered, he'll either bolt or shoot his way out. I go in first. Not alone, Ava said. He's dangerous. So am I. They rolled out in two vehicles, Q's van acting as mobile command and Ava's rental tailing behind with Link on surveillance. Gabriel rode shotgun with Trace, the ex-MP, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. They drove with no music. No chatter. Just mission. The airfield sat like a ghost outpost, flat, silent, wind whipping across the tarmac. A single hangar glowed under pale sodium lights. The drone feed showed movement, one heat signature inside, pacing. Then another approaching from the south. A dark SUV, lights off. Target incoming, Ghost's voice crackled in the earpiece. Vehicle matches Brickman's registered secondary. Likely solo. Gabriel stepped out into the cold night air, the wind slicing against his coat like a memory. He walked calmly across the runway as Brickman climbed out of the SUV, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, eyes flicking left and right like a cornered animal. Going somewhere, Captain? Gabriel asked. Brickman froze. His hand twitched toward his belt habit but no weapon visible. Rowe, he said, spitting the name like a curse. You just don't quit, do you? Gabriel didn't answer. Just stepped closer, slow and steady. This ends tonight, he said. You're not disappearing into the dark with hush money and forged papers. Brickman sneered. You don't understand how this works. People like me, we don't go to jail. We land consulting gigs. You hurt people, Gabriel said quietly. You killed one. You buried the rest. I restored order, Brickman snapped. We made this town better. Gabriel's voice dropped to a whisper. At what cost? Brickman finally lost control. He lunged not with words but with rage, pulling a compact pistol from his coat. But before he could aim, a sharp report cracked through the air. Brickman's shoulder jerked back violently. The gun hit the ground. He screamed, spinning to his knees. Non-lethal round, Trace said over comms from her overwatch position. Right arm. Weapon down. Gabriel stepped forward, kicking the pistol away. You're done. A moment later, federal SUVs roared into the airfield. Agents poured out, guns drawn, flashlights sweeping. Ava climbed out of the lead vehicle, holding her badge high. Captain Darrell Brickman, she shouted, you're under arrest for conspiracy, abuse of power, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice. As they cuffed him, Brickman turned his bleeding face toward Gabriel, fury etched deep. You think this ends with me? Duracore has friends. Real ones. You've started something you can't contain. Gabriel leaned down, met his eyes. No. You started this the moment you decided some lives mattered more than others. Brickman was loaded into a federal vehicle. The agents retrieved the duffel bag full of cash, burner phones, and a USB drive labeled insurance. They wouldn't need it. The truth was already out. Back at the van, Q monitored the upload queue. The raid, the arrest, the confrontation all caught on drone cam. It would hit YouTube within the hour. Gabriel stood in the shadows, watching the hangar door slowly swing shut behind the flashing lights. His breath fogged in the cold. His hands were steady. He wasn't smiling. There was still too much to fix. But tonight? He'd stopped the worst of it. They gave him a suit. Not new. Not tailored. But pressed, dark, and formal enough to stand before power without apology. Gabriel Rowe adjusted the cuffs twice, uncomfortable in clothes that didn't carry grit or memories. Ava stood beside him in the green room of the Rayburn House office building, flipping through her prepared remarks. Q sat near the wall, a cane between his knees, pretending to check emails but really just watching Gabriel. Outside that room, America was waiting. It had been 2 weeks since Brickman's arrest at the airfield. In that time, 8 more Shield Men chapters had been exposed. 3 state attorneys general had opened formal inquiries. Duracor's CEO had stepped down after a series of damning leaks, including internal memos using phrases like aggressive cleanup zones and ROI thresholds tied to demographic displacement. The White House had called for a bipartisan hearing on police corruption and veteran homelessness. And today, for the first time, the man at the center of the storm would speak. The hearing room was packed: senators, journalists, civil rights leaders, veterans groups. Cameras rolled. Live streams buzzed. Hashtags trended. But when Gabriel stepped forward to the microphone, none of that mattered. What mattered was the weight of the silence that followed. And how he filled it. "My name is Gabriel Rowe," he began, his voice measured but clear. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan. I came home with 2 medals, a back injury, and a wife dying of cancer. No one moved. When the VA lost her paperwork, I lost her. When the bank sold my mortgage, I lost my house. When the PTSD got bad, I lost my job. And when I sat down in a diner one night to eat meatloaf, I got arrested for it." The room leaned in. Not because he shouted. But because he didn't have to. They called me a threat. Called me a liability. Mocked my service. And they would have buried me if a waitress with a phone hadn't been braver than most politicians I've ever seen. He paused, eyes sweeping the room. "This isn't about me. It's about what we tolerate in the name of order. It's about systems that punish the vulnerable and reward the violent. It's about the people who serve this country being treated like human trash because they make neighborhoods look less profitable." Gasps. A senator glanced sideways. Another scribbled notes. They called it cleaning up the streets. But what they really meant was, remove the people who can't fight back. Gabriel placed a folded paper on the table in front of him. Slowly, deliberately, he opened it. "This is a list of 23 names," he said. 23 homeless veterans who died in Clearwater Springs in the past 5 years. Some froze to death. Some OD'd after losing access to treatment. Some just disappeared. He raised his head again. They were Americans. They wore the same uniform I did. And they deserved better. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, a silence full of reckoning. When Ava stepped up to deliver her legal breakdown, no one interrupted. When Q showed the forensic trails linking Duracor's money to local development deals and illegal arrests, even the most skeptical senators didn't speak. And when Maya Reese told her story of the diner, the phone call, the brick through her window, every single camera stayed focused. The hearing lasted 5 hours. But the impact would last decades. That night, Gabriel didn't go back to a hotel. He went to a modest house donated by a local veteran support group just outside D.C., a small 2-bedroom with a garden out back and a porch that faced the sunrise. He didn't unpack. He just sat on the edge of the bed, turning his dog tags over in his palm. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was fighting alone. There was no parade. No national anthem. No triumphant brass band. But something shifted in the days after Gabriel Rowe's testimony. Quietly, steadily, America began to wake up. The video of his appearance before Congress went viral. Not for the drama but for the clarity. News anchors replayed his line, "They weren't cleaning streets. They were erasing people," on every major network. Late-night hosts quoted him. Law professors dissected his words. And online, his face became a symbol. Not a celebrity. A witness. Across the country, the ripple effect began. In Tulsa, a retired Marine started a petition to investigate his city's veteran treatment policies. In Chicago, a local nonprofit launched a mobile shelter program called Rowe's Route, offering resources and dignity on wheels. In rural Kansas, a sheriff's deputy turned whistleblower after watching the hearing, admitting he'd been pressured to make arrests on undesirables outside his jurisdiction. And in Clearwater Springs itself, the place where everything had begun, something almost unthinkable happened. The community stood up. The mayor resigned. The Red Owl Diner, under new ownership, became a safe haven cafe employing veterans and unhoused residents alike. Local churches organized a task force. School teachers invited Ava Cross to speak about legal responsibility and moral courage. And Maya Reese? She never went back to waiting tables. She started filming. Her first documentary, The Shield Broken, told the story not of power, but of resistance of a man who sat down for dinner and accidentally started a revolution. Gabriel hated being on camera. But he showed up, because he knew stories were currency, and truth needed a voice louder than his own. Meanwhile, Ava returned to D.C. with fire in her chest and a war chest of evidence. She formed an independent legal coalition, the Justice Arc Project, dedicated to defending unhoused veterans and pursuing civil rights cases in overlooked communities. Q and his team digitized thousands of documents, mapping SHIELD men activity in 6 more states. Their servers ran day and night. Their inboxes filled with tips from whistleblowers, officers, even city planners. Jameson Reese, Maya's brother, completed the academy but turned down his badge. Instead, he joined Ava's legal task force, helping track internal corruption and speaking at police reform panels. He still bore the guilt of silence, but now he wielded it like armor, protective, instructive. And Gabriel? He kept moving. Every week, he traveled to a different town. A school auditorium in Memphis. A city council chamber in Portland. A church basement in Des Moines. No speech was the same. But the message always was. Dignity isn't earned by paperwork. It's earned by existence. You don't need a home to deserve humanity. He never asked for applause. Never waited for ovations. He simply spoke, then stepped down. And the crowds grew. The signs grew. The support grew. A senator introduced a bill in his name, the Rowe Act, a legislative proposal demanding nationwide oversight for police treatment of unhoused individuals, increased funding for veteran housing, and a federal review board for civil rights violations tied to law enforcement. When it passed committee, Gabriel didn't attend the press conference. He was in Milwaukee, standing in the snow next to a man with a torn parka and a cardboard sign. He handed him coffee. They talked. Then he walked away, quieter than the headlines, but no less powerful. One night, back at his small donated home, he sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. Q called. "You seen the numbers?" he asked. Over 10,000 new shelter beds approved nationwide. Federal review boards forming. The Rowe Act's hitting the Senate floor next week. Gabriel didn't answer right away. He was watching a stray dog dart between 2 fence posts. Finally, he said, "It's a start." Q chuckled. "You're the most underwhelmed revolutionary I've ever met." Gabriel cracked a faint smile. "That's because it's not a revolution. It's a correction." There were no cameras. No speeches. No press waiting at the gates. Just a quiet breeze cutting through the trees and the soft crunch of gravel beneath worn boots as Gabriel Rowe walked up the path toward what had once been the last place he wanted to see again, Clearwater Springs. It had been nearly a year since that snowy night at the Red Owl Diner. A year since sugar packets were thrown like insults, since laughter had masked cruelty, since his name had nearly been buried beneath silence. And now, standing before the rebuilt diner, its new sign gleaming under the afternoon sun, he realized something had changed. Not the town. Him. Inside, the walls had been repainted in warm earth tones. Veterans' photos hung beside local art. A donation jar sat on the counter labeled, Second Chances. Gabriel sat at the same stool as before. A different waitress approached, this time young, kind eyes, calm voice. "Can I get you something to eat, sir?" He looked at the menu, then smiled softly. "Whatever the special is." A moment later, she returned with a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "On the house," she said, placing the plate in front of him. "Thank you, for everything." He said nothing. Just nodded. Took the fork. And ate in silence. But this time, it wasn't watched silence. It was peace. Later that day, he walked past the edge of town where the Turner Veterans Community Center now stood, a repurposed factory building transformed into a living testament of what could rise from exposed lies. Inside, job training programs, trauma counseling, medical clinics, and transitional housing. Kids played soccer outside in the open field. A veteran taught a young teen how to patch a tire. Another group tended the vegetable garden near the back fence. Gabriel entered the lobby. On one wall, a mural stretched across 20 feet, portraits of veterans past and present. At its center was a quote in bold paint: "We don't leave our own behind, not overseas, and not on our streets." Q wheeled around the corner from the admin office, holding 2 coffees. "Took you long enough," he said, grinning. Gabriel smirked. "Some of us walk." They sat by the windows overlooking the garden, sipping in silence for a while. Then Q said, "Ava's upstairs. She's organizing the new legal clinic team. Maya's doing a screening of the film in DC tonight. Sold out crowd. I heard a senator cried." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "I still haven't watched it." "I know," Q said. "But you lived it. That counts more." Outside, Rachel, the first woman to record the diner confrontation, was helping set up a community art wall. On it were letters, photos, dog tags, medals, and one small handwritten card from a child that read, "Thank you for protecting the world when others didn't." Gabriel stared at it for a long time. Later that evening, he returned to his small home tucked at the edge of the woods, just far enough from town to breathe. The garden behind the house had grown, tomatoes climbing their stakes, mint spilling out of the box, rosemary flowering at the edge. He stepped inside. Removed his coat. Set the dog tags gently on the shelf above the fireplace next to others he'd collected from the fallen. One in particular caught his eye. Malik Johnson. His brother in arms. He touched the tags. Whispered, "We kept the promise." Before bed, he sat on the porch in the quiet dark, stars scattered above him like old maps. He didn't think of war. He didn't think of Brickman, or the trials, or the recordings, or the endless interviews. He thought of a question a teenager once asked him after a school visit: "Do you think someone like me could ever be a hero?" He hadn't answered then. But he would now. "Yes," he whispered into the wind. "You just have to show up. That's all it takes." He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he slept through the night. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about memory. About how justice is never a single moment, but a series of choices we make every day to see people, to stand up, to speak even when our voices shake. If this story moved you, share it. Tell someone. Help someone. Or just notice the unseen. Because heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they sit quietly at a diner, and refuse to be erased. Subscribe for more true justice stories, because silence ends when we decide it does.